on, guys? Welcome back to United View. Hope everyone is doing very well, having a good Friday afternoon. It's about, actually less than 24 hours to go until match day. Manchester United versus Everton at Old Trafford. The lunchtime kickoff. United looking to bounce back from a devastating Manchester derby defeat. And Erik ten Hag, as always, has been talking to the assembled media at Carrington ahead of tomorrow's Premier League encounter. And really, I suppose the biggest focus throughout the entirety of the presser was injuries, recoveries, and availability of players, and kind of defending his record, really, I suppose, actually, depending on these injuries and who's been available to him and when a certain player is going to be available to him. The big sort of top line stuff, some had hoped that Rasmus Højlund would be available for tomorrow. According to the Manchester United manager, that is not the case, but he will be available next week for the FA Cup clash against Liverpool, as will quite a few people, actually, possibly Harry Maguire, Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Talk a little bit about Mason Mount when he's going to be back too. But once again, bemoaning injuries. There was a lot of injury talk in Erik ten Hag. You could really tell today, I felt certainly, talking through gritted teeth when it came to injuries and again, kind of sort of defending his record this season and actually last season based on injuries and availability. So we're going to be getting into all of it. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right hand corner. I can see people filing in when it comes to the chat at the moment. I can see Eskimo says get the likes up. Simon McGill says big up everyone. Steffi Jenks says big up as well. Atom K says 8 a.m. here in Texas. Deep in the heart of Texas. Yes, indeed. Suleiman says, big up, Owen. Care to give us some insights before you dive into today's press conference? Insights as to what? About the presser. I can give you insights about the presser. But insights as to what else? I mean, we don't need to talk about films again. I ain't seen many of them. We spoke about that and plenty of other things. By the way, actually, too, a bit of a plug before we get into the press conference. Tonight's episode, The Trinity, episode 6, is going to be dropping at 6 p.m. GMT here in the UK. A lot of people have been really enjoying that, are excited about that. Today's episode is fantastic. Absolutely. It's a brilliant episode. Flex, KG, and myself. So be sure to tune in. Watch that from 6 o'clock. It's a madness, honestly. It's just, there's so much going on in today's episode of The Trinity. I can't even get into it, so just go and watch, absolutely. Let's get into the press conference, though. Let's get into the questions. Let's get into the answers. That's what you're here for. So, as you would expect, Peachy, Simon Peach, straight in there as always. He's there at Carrington. I bet he's well excited. I bet he can't wait for Thursdays and Fridays when he gets sit there going, oh, I'm going to get my team news. Team news is coming in. Yes, I'm going to ask the team news. Straight in, straight away. Simon Peach, straight in he goes, team news. Eric, players available? Some people coming back from injuries. What's going on with that? Specifically, he asked about Johnny Evans, and Marcus Rashford, because they were injury doubts after coming off at the Etihad last weekend. It had actually been reported that they kind of fought just to be available for the game. So there was concern about them. Are they going to be back? Here's what Erik ten Hag had to say about it. You can see it right there. He says, that's the good news. They being Rashford and Evans, recovered after the derby, so they are available. The rest is the same squad apart from Amari Forson. He dropped out. He has an injury. So as far as the players and the squad, we've basically got the same squad. Again, we've got the same squad that we really had for Forest, same squad that we had for Man City. So if you're going to really pick the team out of that, you would say what? In goal, Andre Onana. I think the back four is a bit more interesting because I predicted that Victor Lindelof would be left back at the Etihad. I was correct with that just because I thought he's going to have to go with a more defensively minded fullback. And obviously, look, we're so limited. We don't have a left back available. I think my prediction is Sofyan Amrabat will go in at left back. That's my prediction for tomorrow. I don't think Lindelof stays at left back. I think it's going to be Amrabat, and I wouldn't be shocked if the defensive partnership was actually Varane and Lindelof. Although, you know me, I'm a Johnny Evans guy. I think he deserves so much credit for what he has managed to pull off this season when he shouldn't have played anywhere near the games that he has. But whenever he's played, maybe bar a couple of performances, I mean, he played in Manchester Derby. I bet Johnny Evans, when he came back to Manchester United, I bet when Johnny Evans came back to Manchester United, he never thought he'd be playing in the derby. I think he probably just thought I might play a Carabao Cup game or two. That's about it. He never thought I'm going to be starting at the Etihad. Of course not. So for the fact that he's been doing that and pulling it off with an injury, I think is a huge credit to him. I really, really do. And he's one of our better defenders, which is crazy to say in 2024. But in terms of predicting the team based on that team news with what Eric is saying there, I think it's going to be Amrabat left back just because you know what Everton are going to do. They're going to sit deep, they're going to do low block, and they're going to go long ball. And I just think that Ten Hag might look at it the same way that he looked at it with Nottingham Forest away in the FA Cup, where he goes, you know what? We're probably going to have a lot of the ball. If we have a lot of the ball, Amrabat will come into midfield. So I think that Amrabat starts left back. That's kind of my wild prediction for tomorrow. But as I mentioned, I would like it to be Evans and Varane, but I don't think it will. I think it'd be Varane and Lindelof, considering Evans is 36 and coming back from an injury. So that means Dalot at right back. Midfield will be the same. Kobe, Casemiro, Bruno Fernandes. Left wing, Garnacho. Up front, Marcus Rashford, it will be. And then it's just a case of who's it going to be on the right-hand side. Is it going to be Anthony, or does Ahmad get a rare start? And maybe tomorrow's the day. Maybe tomorrow is the time that Ahmad actually starts. I mean, it's no guarantee that Anthony starts anymore. Who even knows? But we're dealing with a bit of a limited pack, it must be said, aren't we? So that's the team news as to who is available for tomorrow's game at Old Trafford. Now, what about the players that we were hoping were going to be back for tomorrow's game, and what about them for the future? What about Rasmus Højlund? What about Mason Mount? What about Harry Maguire? What about Wan-Bissaka? What about all of them? When are they going to be back? Well, Erik ten Hag was asked the question, and he said the following. You can see it right there. He said, Mason Mount, I think he is in a good spell now, and he will return shortly. I think after the international break. For next week, some players are planning to return, hopefully when the process will continue like it is now. Harry Maguire and Aaron Wan-Bissaka, I expect them to be available for our game against Liverpool. He was then asked if Rasmus Højlund's involved in that. He said yes, Rasmus as well, or Højlund as well. So we don't have anyone really coming back this week, but we do have people on the way back. We do have people recovering soon, and it's going to be really interesting to see what the next couple of weeks looks like, isn't it? Or certainly pre and post international break, because next week's the big one. FA Cup, Old Trafford, Manchester United versus Liverpool, and with the players we have available right now, that ain't going to be enough. We've seen that against Manchester City at the Etihad. I know it's at home, but with the players we have available now and for tomorrow, I would not want to have Liverpool coming to Old Trafford. I don't really want them to be coming to Old Trafford anyway. It's quite concerning. But if we can have Rasmus Højlund back, if we can have Aaron Wan-Bissaka back, if we can have Harry Maguire back, I know people will be like, oh, Maguire and Wan-Bissaka, they're rubbish, they're terrible. I don't know what you're talking about. Just because we have just a lack of sheer numbers, someone like Aaron Wan-Bissaka coming back is actually massively key, because we can then put someone at left back that's actually a full back. You would think it would be Dalot. I don't even think that's a certainty. We have seen Wan-Bissaka play at left back, but I was thinking a game like Liverpool, he would go with Dalot at the left and Wan-Bissaka on the right. And even that's just that will help a lot, considering the sheer limitations we have when it comes to numbers. And having Harry Maguire back, to be fair, prior to his injury, he wasn't in the best form against Fulham and Luton. He did score against Fulham, of course, but he did struggle in a couple of those games. But just having those numbers back will help. And of course, Rasmus Højlund being back will help massively, and hopefully he'll be back for the FA Cup game. And then post-international break, that's when they said Lissandro Martinez was going to be back too. So that's positive. And Mason Mount. I suppose it's just a case of what position, in terms of the league and in terms of the cup competition, what position are Manchester United going to be in at that point? Are they going to be in a half-decent position in the league still? I say touching distance. Top four I just don't think's on for us anymore. You never know. But the swing that has to happen with Villa dropping points and us picking up points in the space of 11 games, I just don't see. I just don't see that happening. But anything's possible, I suppose. But again, I don't see that. And the cup competition, are we through? Because if we are, then you go, right, we're getting players back. Maybe there is something to aim towards this season? I don't know. But players are on the way back. I suppose it's just a case of, are they going to come back in time for Erik ten Hag to really pick up some results, which are more than desperately needed. What are people saying in the chat here at the moment? Chima says, give Erik ten Hag a new contract. Let's start cooking. Wow. King says, Ahmad ain't starting. Tabrez says, Mason Mount been out for 3 or 4 months with a calf injury. WTF. It really is crazy, isn't it? Absolutely. Astro says they will have a full team, them Scousers also. That's also the thing that I didn't really get when people were trying to sort of make that justification. When people were saying like, but Liverpool got their injury issue, so we'll be fine. And it's like, well, they do, but they don't. Yes, obviously they got players out, but Nunez, he missed obviously the Carabao Cup final, but he's back. He scored yesterday. Salah will be back. Like, those people are coming back as well. So it's not like we're facing this totally weak. We're not facing the team that finished the Carabao Cup final, put it that way. They will have their players back, but just us having some players back for that game will be really important and will be really needed. And it gives you at least a smidge more confidence than you would have previously. Not a lot of confidence, I know, but still, it's a smidge. It's a smidge of confidence, absolutely. Cobb says he's always blaming injuries, but they aren't they a result of overtraining he did in the preseason? We're going to get into the injuries because that's really, as I mentioned, the biggest, I think, key takeaway from this press conference is his comments on the injuries. So next, he was asked about the performance in the league this season. He was asked, you're 11 points off the top 4. Last year, you were successful in the sense that you won the Carabao Cup, got to an FA Cup final, finished in the top 4, third in the league. Do you need one of them to avoid failure this season? That was the question that Erik ten Hag was asked. Basically, do you need to win the FA Cup or do you need to get in the top 4 to salvage anything from this season and to avoid this season being a failure? Here's what Erik ten Hag had to say. He said, quote, we want to be successful. We need to be successful. Sometimes seasons are going like we are now but we don't accept that. We will fight. We have problems and have had problems with the squad injury-wise, but with the players available, we will fight. It doesn't matter who is the opposition. We go for the win. So Erik ten Hag, this was kind of the first bit when he was talking about the injuries that Manchester United have had this season and the troubles that we've had this season, saying that there's a desire, they want to be successful, but the injuries have kind of put a push back to that. It's one of those sort of generic press conference answers, to be fair. We want to be successful. Of course you're going to say that in a press conference. I mean, that's kind of that par for the course, right? Par for the course when it comes to that. Yeah, that answer certainly. But I think the next question is probably the interesting one, and it was about the direction of the project at Manchester United, saying, just to kind of pick up from where the previous question was, you've got 11 games left to play. What is more important? Is it getting the results, or is it showing performances in those results to convince everyone, when it comes to the fans, the players, and maybe even the minority owners, that the project is in the right direction? And they kind of slipped that in at the end. They said to show the project's in the right direction. He was very quick with his first bit when he said they went project's in the right direction. Like, he didn't let that one sort of slip in and not address it. He said the project is going in the right direction when we have the players available. Top football is about winning games. Keep working on better performances. We want to play on maximum levels, and when the players are available, good players in key positions, you miss players who have a very high impact on the way you want to play. So very, very much, and this was kind of the beginning of this in this presser, is he is really doubling down on we would be doing better. We would have won more games. Our performances would have been better had we not had these injuries. He's very key and very big to push on. The injuries have really hurt us this season. Now, I suppose I should probably continue on when talking about this injury stuff, because this is really what he's talking about. So the next question about this is about, with all of these players missing, following up on this, the players that you're missing, would you say, and this is, I suppose, the real key question, I think, would you say, given the injuries that you've sustained this season and the players that are missing, do you think this team has overachieved, basically saying you didn't even think the team would do this well because you've got all these people missing, or do you think the team has underachieved this season? And Erik ten Hag said the following. He said, No team can't deal with it with so many injuries. I think we played to maximum levels if you take in respect the availability of the players. We missed so many key players over the part of the season. The performances we have seen when the players are available in January and February, the performances are very good. When the players were not even fit, they could do even better. So he was saying that actually at those points where he has cited January, February, when players were available, he said that at that point they weren't even fit. They weren't even really at their peak. If they were at their peak, we'd have done even better. So he's really doubling down on the injuries have cost us this season. The injuries have cost us, and he's saying that no team would be not impacted by these injuries, particularly to the key players and particularly when it comes to certain positions. Now, how do I feel about this? This is a curious one, isn't it? Because I don't dispute partially what he's saying. You can't. When he's saying injuries have cost us and hurt us this season, absolutely they have. I mean, we've been ravaged with injuries, particularly defensively. Our injuries across the back line, as I mentioned earlier on, we played Johnny Evans centre-back, starting at the Etihad this season, the Manchester Derby. That's crazy. He played at Anfield this season as well. That's crazy because of our injuries. So, of course, we don't have a recognised left-back available. Of course, injuries have hurt us. But we're not alone in that regard. We're not. We're not alone because a lot of Premier League teams have had injuries this season. A lot of teams in general have had injuries this season. And I suppose this is the ultimate argument. This is the ultimate debate point involved in all of this, isn't it? It's despite the injuries that a lot of other teams have had, they've still managed to, even in, I suppose, negative results, still managed to have a style of play or a pattern of play. It hasn't just completely eradicated and completely disappeared and just completely obliterated, which I suppose that's the argument to Erik ten Hag, isn't it? And this is because later on in the press conference, he goes, I don't want to use injuries as an excuse. But I mean, when 3 or 4 answers in the presser and the reasons you're giving for underachieving this, because he didn't say whether he's overachieved or underachieved. He just said when you look at the injuries this season, it explains a lot. It's a difficult one because I do agree with partially what he's saying, but you still expect with the players you do have available. I still think you can expect more. I still say, with injuries, Fulham's the best example of this. Fulham's, I think, the best example. That game where we lost at home to Fulham. We had injuries that day, so did Fulham. Fulham had their best players not available, or their key players not available. And still that day, they played their football, their style of play, and they played us off the park. That is unacceptable. You look at teams like Spurs this season. They've had periods of time where they've had injury and players not being available. They've had negative results, but they've still played their football. Look at a team like Brighton. They've had players that haven't been available this season. They've still played their football. With United this season, yes, we've been hurt by injuries. Yes, really, really bad at our injury hurt us. And we have seen, I would say, results-wise, results have improved when better players are back. But even when he said January, February, we saw better performances. Again, I go, yes, in comparison to other performances, but there was still a lot of pressure and a lot of scrutiny. You know, there was still a lot of scrutiny and a lot of pressure on the performances, because I remember watching those games and I remember doing the full-time view with people calling in after those games. When we beat West Ham at home 3-0, or when we played Newport in the FA Cup, or when we played Spurs at home, or whenever those games were in January, February, people were still complaining about the performances, even with the players back. So I've always said, with better players back, you're going to play better and you're going to get better results. But I don't know if that's the ultimate be-all and end-all. This is what's really hurt us this season, just the injuries. I think that's an oversimplification. In all honesty. What are people saying here? Brio Diaz says, Owen, stop lying. About what? About about that we haven't. I've never said that we didn't have injuries. This is again. We get into this again. We've had injuries. Yes, we've had injuries. We're not the only team though. We are not. We're not the only team to have injuries, and people have dealt with those injuries better, or their style of play has played better. Brio also says Fulham was still counter-attacking. Fulham had their players out and they played the better football that day. That's it. That there's no excusing it. I went into the game going, there is no excuse. Honestly, I mentioned this after the City game last weekend as well. I couldn't really complain that much coming out of it. I know people did, but coming out of that game last weekend, well, going into it, my point of view was, I think we're going to lose, and because they're better than us, and we do have absences as well. I don't think it's going to be pretty. The only way we can try and get something is sit deep, get behind the ball, get a bit of luck, hit them on the counter-attack and score. As long as they show effort, as long as they show grit and desire, then I'll give them credit for that. And they did that. I mean, maybe towards the end, that last goal was just a mess, and I'll get angry at that one. But I can't fault the setup last weekend, because what else are you going to do? I can't fault the effort, particularly in the first half of the players, so I couldn't get angry about that. What I didn't understand last weekend was people saying that going into the game, losing, and then getting angry after the game when they put out what their kind of acceptable level was, and then got to that acceptable level and went, oh, I don't care. Oh, that's rubbish. We're terrible. Why don't we go there, dominate possession? I'm like, are you on crack? Why? When were we going to go to City and dominate possession? When were we going to go there and create all this chance? We were never going to do that. We were going to lose. We were always going to lose. So I'm not angry about that. I'm angry about, again, the Fulham game. When, yeah, we had injuries. So did Fulham. We're at home. They hadn't won there in 20 years. We lost. We deserved to lose. We were fortunate to equalise. Let's be honest. That I'm angry about. I'm angry about facing Bournemouth at home this season and holding 3 goals. I'm very angry about that. I'm angry about losing at home to Crystal Palace this season. A Roy Hodgson Crystal Palace. He's no longer in the job. Palace are rubbish. And we lost to them. Sorry, Palace fans, if you're watching. I'm angry about those. Those are the things you should be angry about. And that's got nothing to do with injuries. That's just not being good enough. Not setting up the team the right way. That's the thing that you should be angry about. Not last weekend. And have injuries played a part in that? Ish, but it's no excuse. Absolutely. No excuse at all. That can't happen at Manchester United. It just can't. And I know I hate the whole standards because we've been rubbish for a decade, but there are still some. There are. And Fulham at home, Bournemouth at home, 3-0. 3-0 Bournemouth at home. Those are crazy results. And teams have had injuries of their own this season and missed key players. And that just hasn't happened. It hasn't. So it's one of those ones where he's not necessarily totally wrong. And he didn't say it was just because of the injuries. But when you highlight it in press conferences, then people are going to react to that, certainly. So yes. What are people saying here? Atom K says, agree on the City game. Chima says, Liverpool didn't qualify for the Champions League last season because of injury. But the difference is with that as well is Liverpool, people forget this. Like, this is where I talk about revisionist history. You forget last season, we stumbled over the line for Champions League. Liverpool, they were unfortunate that they started to pick up momentum just too late. They couldn't make up that ground. But if the season, and it's kind of a redundant statement to make because the season's 38 games, but if the season was a little bit longer, Liverpool would have overtaken us. Absolutely. Because we were stumbling. We've been stumbling for a while. We have. Towards the end of last season, we said it, like some performances weren't great. We kept picking up the victory. That's it. And the Liverpool, they got hurt by injuries, but towards the end of last season, and that's with an aging midfield as well. There was momentum there, and that's just the situation. What else are people saying here in the chat? DK says, this is the problem at United. We never know whether it's bad coaching, players' attitude, or all. Imran says, Newcastle missing key players and they're suffering like us. Absolutely, of course they are. And this is the sort of selective hearing, isn't it? Because I'm not suggesting, I've said multiple times, when your players come back results will get better. We have seen that. Results will get better. But I'm talking the overall performances, because to suggest that the performances were much better in January, February, there'll be a lot of people that will dispute that, because I remember hearing it at the time. I was defending Erik ten Hag at the time because I've always said results matter the most. It's all about results. It's a results business. That's what it's all about. Erik ten Hag won a manager a month this season. Why? Because he got results. Because he won games. That's what it's been about. When the better players come back, the results will improve. Factual. When you're talking about performances, though, that's a difference. That is. What else have we got here? What's the next question? Next about players missing. Yes, Rasmus Højlund. There was a bit of a question about Rasmus Højlund, saying, of course, he's been named Player of the Month today. Deserved. Was fantastic in February. Really unfortunate to get injured when he did. The question was, how much have you missed him, and how frustrating is it that he got injured when he did, and when he was in such great form? Erik ten Hag says, I have to do it. We have to do it with the players available. I will never complain about that. We have to get the best out of it. That is our aim. So once again, despite referencing injuries a lot, he's also said he's not going to complain about the injuries. So I suppose it gets into the territory of what's your definition of complaining? Is it bringing up reasons, or I don't know? How do you define it? Is Ten Hag? You can let me know. Do you think Ten Hag is complaining about injuries, or do you think he's just bringing up facts and just bringing up legitimate reasons and legitimate? And this is where it's difficult as a manager, because you're asked a question and you answer it with what your opinion is, and then you get judged on it, don't you? You go, he's complaining, he's moaning, he's saying injuries, he's saying this, he's saying that, but he's just answering the questions. He's given the people ask him his opinions on things, or they ask him for reasons about certain things. He gives them, and then people criticize them. It's like me sitting here, isn't it? What's your opinion on it? You give your opinion. Your opinion's shit. You go, well, okay, that's why I'm here. And that's why he's there, is to answer the media's questions, isn't it? So, yeah, it's a bit of an unenviable position as a manager, isn't it? What else have we got here? Joe Isaac says, in aging midfield, we have Casemiro and Eriksen. Age, to be honest, Eriksen don't play anymore, though, does he? That's the difference. Suleiman says, I find it funny, some fans complain about style of play when we get results and vice versa, like you can never win. That's also the point involved in all of this as well, is we did see this season, and I kind of touched on this in the Trinity that's coming out a bit later, but when we did get results this season, and we were, as Ten Hag pointed out, was unbeaten in 2024, that still wasn't enough. And I do sympathise with him with that, because I do think the goalposts do move around a lot and do get shifted a lot. Absolutely. King says, if it's a results business, Jose may as well have stayed. His performance wasn't a good watch, but he won games. Imran says, it's not complaining, but it looks like, it's like, look at these issues. He can always go back to it. Simon says, stating facts to stop the media narrative. Them Clone says, Owen, how much percentage-wise is the blame on Erik ten Hag, Murto and Arnold? This is also the thing that people get very angry about. It's always got to be 100% on one person, which I've said plenty of times. That's just not the case, is it? I think everyone's culpable. Everyone has a share of the blame. It's just upon you for which you determine how much percentage should go where. I think that the players hold a huge amount of blame. Obviously, the Glazers, they hold the ultimate blame because they've run United into the ground. But John Murto, his two summer transfer windows have been a disaster, haven't they, in terms of money spent and contracts handed out. Richard Arnold was lots of different issues have been a total mess. Erik ten Hag is not innocent. That is where I push back, and people don't like this, but the manager does not get a complete pass, because football doesn't work like that. It doesn't. Football doesn't work like that. You have to have some element of culpability, and you have to have some kind of responsibility for when you how you set your team up. And people can talk about players and players available and what have you, but the manager is responsible for that. The players are also responsible for that too, for not being able to pass the ball. The professional footballers, they should be better than that, and they should be embarrassed by some of their performances. The executives at the club, they hold a level of responsibility for it as well. But there is just, I have noticed this, and this goes back into the tribalism that we have seen recently. And I think both sides galvanize the other. I really do, or radicalize the other, and they get further and further and further apart. And you're not allowed any middle ground in it. You're not. If you don't go all in on it's the players, then you're an idiot. If you don't go all in on the manager, then you're an idiot as well. And I just will never understand that rationality. I just cannot wrap my head around it because I think it's oversimplification. I do. James says, Owen, you're moving the goalpost. Revising history. I don't think I'm revising history when it comes to saying that other teams have had injuries. I don't think it's revising history to say that in January and February, whilst we were getting results, and I was praising Erik ten Hag for getting results, that there weren't people complaining about style of play because, again, I sat in this very chair. I sat in this chair and listened to people after we won games 3-0 against West Ham at Old Trafford and say we were rubbish. I remember. I was here. I absolutely was. I'm not saying that was my perception or my feeling at the time, but for Erik ten Hag to sort of come out and suggest performances were really good in January and February, I think that is a stretch because I can't remember the last time we played really, really good. You tell me in the chat, when was the last time you came out of a game and you were like, Man United were really, really, really good today. Really, really good. And I'd love to know. I'd love to know what the benchmark is of that. Because I remember talking to fans. And there were people at the time going, they were happy with it. I was happy with results. But I don't think it's revising history. I think what is revising history is to... and this is what I also say too about it. I say that when you get results, people do kind of gloss over or forget performances. Because you just look back and go, oh, we won 3-0. We must have played well that day. That's it. What are people saying about that in the chat? This is interesting. This is Imran says, so Owen, you're saying United have never played a good game under Erik ten Hag. It's exactly what I'm saying. Never, ever, ever. We played well at points last season until we won the Carabao Cup a bit. that was about it. Crystal Palace, that's true. Carabao Cup. We did play well in the Carabao Cup against Crystal Palace this season. That probably is actually. Cafe Con Lecce saying it's not a stretch. The performances were better when we had players like Lissandro back, even though it was brief. Let's be honest for once. That again, this is what I'm not disputing. I'm not disputing that we played better. We did. I've always said that. You will play better when your better players are back. But I still remember people not happy with those performances because they were still like, well, still not playing great. I'm still not sure. It's better. Obviously, we're winning games, but I'm not sure. James says you revised last season with Liverpool. Which one? I mean, we lost 7-0 at Anfield. Oh, you revised last season with Liverpool. And their injuries last season. Liverpool last season didn't finish in the top 4 because their midfield was shot. That's why they got rid of it this summer. That's ultimately why Liverpool didn't succeed last season. And they started to build up a bit of momentum towards the end of the season. They didn't have enough time. That's the reality of what happened with Liverpool last season. If you want to talk about a reason for Liverpool not succeeding because of injuries, that was during the season after they won the league. They were hurt with injuries that season. They still managed to qualify in the end for the Champions League, but that was a drop-off with injuries. Last season, they just came to the end of their cycle, but very quickly in one transfer window, they got their midfield and got rid of it and brought in a new one. And look where they are now. That's what it is with us. And people can have different opinions, different perceptions of things. My perception was, and I remember towards the end of last season, and this is what's good about being in this game. I remember towards the end of last season, there were people going, Man United aren't going to make top 4. Culture camps. I remember it. He was stood outside. He was on one of the podcasts, I think. And he was like, Man United aren't going to make top 4. And I was like, we are going to make top 4. There's too much for us to blow it. And we didn't blow it. We had it with games to spare. We got top 4. I never thought we wouldn't get it towards the end of the last season. But I was very conscious of that we are kind of stumbling over the line. And if it was a little bit longer, we'd have probably been in a bit trouble. But it wasn't. We got it and it was comfortable. But there was an element of momentum that Liverpool had, and there was an element of what we didn't have. which was momentum. We didn't have a ton of momentum towards the end of the last season. We had it for a period of time, then it dropped off, and injuries played a part in that as well. But I don't think that's revisionist of last season at all. I really don't. Cafe Con Lecce says, it's unrealistic to expect us to play really, really well when players are returning sporadically. There is no consistency. That backline is essentially Ollie's backline. And what else are people saying? John James says, comments about United in contrast to others is so much more scrutinised, even by the manager using the word very in review of a win or what others deem lacklustre. There's never an argument to win. And as Courtstar says, plus pre-season was bad. That's also true. That's also absolutely true. You forgot we lost Martinez at the end of last season. I'm not forgetting that at all. I just said injuries hurt us last season. That's why I don't think we won the Europa League. It's because Martinez and Varane got injured in the same game. Because I think that would have been totally different. But we did stumble over the line last season, and we didn't have a great preseason, so we didn't have a ton of momentum. That's what happened. I think the people to say the opposite, I think is revisiting history. Like, there's a very noticeable drop off between the football we were playing up to about the Carabao Cup final. And then that Liverpool result happened. And we weren't the same. We haven't been the same really since then. And then we got injuries. Martinez, Varane. Remember, Rashford got injured. And then his purple patch disappeared as well. And then, obviously, played the FA Cup final. Didn't win that. And then it's not really been the same for a while, really. Yes. Where are we at when it comes to likes? We've got nearly 500 people watching, less than 100 likes. If you haven't already, click the like button. Be sure to subscribe as well, bottom right-hand corner. Where were we at? The next question was about Sean Dyche, and it was about what he's done at Everton. What does he make of the work that he's done there? Eric Ten Hag said it's very clear his handwriting in a style of play. He's done that very good since he took over. He's made them very fit. He's got a very good structure. They're a very good team, but we know what to do to beat them because, of course, we have multiple times under Sean Dyche. This was the final question of the press conference. There was actually a really good one as well. Really good question about this, saying you won 61 of your first 100 matches, and also a cup in that period of time as well. That's better than Jurgen Klopp. That's better than Mikel Arteta. I know you don't want to use injuries as an excuse, but how much have they derailed what was a positive trajectory? Now, this is where I would say I don't think it's a case of using excuses, because he's been asked a question here. So he's been asked a question, so he's going to answer the question about injuries. Here's what he said. He said, it tells that we are in the right direction. So imagine we had many more players available and not setbacks and injuries. Could have easily had 75 wins. And that tells you the bright future of this team. When you compare it with other managers, other teams, or previous managers in this big club, you can see there is a bright future. It is a good balance in ages in this squad. Young players, middle-aged players. Imagine when they are available. Could have easily won from 100 games 75. It's a big difference with the stats that you mentioned. So he was asked about how injuries have affected that trajectory, and he said he would have won more games had we not had those injuries. And I think that's a fair comment. I think it is. Why not? I think with the whole stats stuff recently, as I mentioned, I think stats. I've said this a million times over the years, not even just with Ten Hag. You can find a stat to back up anything. Any argument you want to make, you can back up a stat. You can use a stat to back it up. You can have Eric Ten Hag's win percentage. People use that. You can also have the amount of games he's lost. People have that. You can have positive records that he's broken. Was he fastest manager to whatever it was, the victories? You can have negative ones about people that have beat us as well. It's a combination of everything, isn't it? It's the eye test, it's the important stats, I suppose. But I guess the overarching thing in this press conference is, have injuries affected Manchester United this season? The answer is yes. Of course they have affected Manchester United this season. There's no doubt about that. I suppose the counter argument to that is, despite those injuries, should we have done better? And I suppose that's up for you to decide, isn't it? Yes, injuries have hurt us. Yes, injuries have affected performances. And yes, we would have probably done better had we had all of our best players available. But sometimes that's not a luxury that you get in football. Particularly, you've seen it with lots of clubs. They don't always have the best players available. But have we managed to react to that appropriately, or have we still underperformed despite the people not being available? That's the key thing, isn't it? That's ultimately the thing that I think Ineos will be deciding as well. Or I think, to be honest, I think they've already decided. I do agree with what Gary Neville and Paul Scholes are saying. I think they've come up with their decision, in all honesty, already. And it's just a case of, I think, if Erik ten Hag can change their mind as well. Let's see what people are saying in the chats before we wrap things up as well. As Steffi Jenks says, oh my god, why so stingy with the likes? Please take 2 seconds to smash the like button. John James says, I agree with you, Owen. I'm just numb to our performances this season, but I will speak well of a win, even if we fluke it. What else are people saying here? Ashley Williams says, the FA Cup final against City was the final straw for me, just waiting for Erik ten Hag and Rashi to go since the final whistle. James Brown says, name other teams that have had injuries at a consistent level that United had. Well, that's the point. It's been brought up, plenty have had injuries this season because people point to them. People point to Spurs. People point to Newcastle. People point to Liverpool. People point to a lot of these teams that have had injuries this season. And it's about how you manage with them. As I said, I think the ultimate question coming out of this press conference is, with the injuries, which have they hurt Manchester United? Have they prevented Manchester United from getting wins? Yes, of course they have. But has it been enough to lose other games or certain elements of that we have this season? Is that a good enough reason? Is that a good enough excuse? Some people will say yes. Some people will say no. That's the difference, isn't it, as well? So we shall see. We shall see. Cafe Con Lecce says, in his second season of a rebuild decimated by injuries, is the top four honestly reasonable? Let's be honest. People, this is the debate. And it must be said, it's a challenging time right now, isn't it? Because it's so polarized, isn't it? It's so polarized. If you dare mention Erik ten Hag in a negative manner, people will jump all over you. If you mention that it's not his fault, people will jump all over you. And we're into that territory again. We don't. It's never calm for very long, is it? It's always something. Whether it's David De Gea, whether it's Ronaldo, whether it's Sancho. We always have these sort of infights, don't we? We always have these infights on these big issues. And this is what it's going to be between now and the end of the season, isn't it, as well? So we shall see how it plays out. But there you go, guys. That's the press conference for you. We will be back later on, 6 p.m. The Trinity podcast, Flex, KG, and myself. That'll be dropping at 6 p.m. as always on a Friday, so be sure to check that out. Tomorrow, of course, it is match day, so we'll have the full match day experience. We'll have a road trip. KG and myself are going to be on the match view tomorrow, so that's going to be a lot of fun. We'll have fan views, player ratings, etc. outside Old Trafford with Flex. So a big day. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. Click the like button. Click the notifications so you get notified when we go live or a new video is uploaded. I'm out of here. Peace.